Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Welcome to my show. I could not be more pleased to have as my honored guest today the great Lieutenant Jason Redman. He's a retired Navy SEAL. He's a war hero, and he's going to teach all of us how to get off the X. And getting off the X is so critical at this time because all of us have been ambushed by life. Lieutenant Redman, welcome to the show.
Honored to be back on with you. It's always good to see you and spend time together. Although now all of us are doing it virtually.
When we talk about life's ambushes, you had a real ambush happen to you. Why don't you remind people of your story?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I'm very fortunate to still be here. Iraq, 2007, I was leading a high-level SEAL team onto a mission to go after the #1 leader for the Al-Qaeda organization for all of Western Iraq. And my team and I went after that individual. We walked into a very, very well-executed Al-Qaeda ambush, about 15 individuals with machine guns. I was shot 8 times in that engagement between my body armor and body, 2 rounds to the left elbow that almost destroyed my arm, almost took it off, and then a round to the face, which, did a lot of damage, obviously. And fast forward about 96 hours from that moment, I found myself laying in a hospital bed in Bethesda, Maryland. And here I was at the height of my career. Here I was, leading these top tier SEAL teams. I was getting ready to screen for my next leadership position at hopefully another SEAL team that I was screening to go over to. And then 96 hours later, I find myself in this hospital bed with doctors telling me, we're probably going to have to amputate your arm. It's going to take years to put you back together. You are, obviously very mangled. I was trached. I was being fed out of a stomach tube. I was too weak to get out of that bed. I remember just the absolutely overwhelming, helpless feeling that I thought to myself. And I was like, my special operations career is over. I'm going to be permanently disabled and I'm going to be forever disfigured. And it was such an overwhelming stress, anxiety, I just felt pinned to that spot and like there was nowhere I could go. But thankfully, I thought back to the firefight and I thought back to my entire special operations career. And we had been taught a very key principle. Whenever you get into a firefight, whenever you get into a specific attack or a bad situation, you have to get off the X. And we call the X, that is the central point of the attack. So when I was in that ambush and my team and I were getting all shot up, we were on the X. And I had this amazing revelation as I was laying in that hospital bed. I was like, man, you're on the X again. You've just transferred from one virtual battlefield ambush into now a life ambush. And I realized that the same principles applied, that you have to move regardless of how overwhelmed you feel, regardless of the, in one situation, it was actual bullets and bombs, but in life ambushes, it's the bullets and bombs of life. But you still have to get up. You have to function. You have to drive forward. You have to move. And so many people get too overwhelmed in the moment. And I almost did in that hospital bed. I felt that. And it was only over the years, many, many years of working with wounded warriors, working with companies that have been through crisis and failure and change, working with individuals that have been through some level of trauma or failure, that I realized everybody gets on the X, Jeff. And guess what? Right now, the entire country is on the X. We are all in one major life ambush.
Tell us about that moment of inspiration in which you create a poster and it went viral.
Yeah, so shortly after I told myself, hey, you got to get off the X. You can't lay here and feel sorry for yourself. That's going to accomplish nothing. The longer you sit on the X, it's like quicksand. The more it pulls you down and the harder it is to move. So I had already committed to driving forward, and I was going to lift people up. And you can lead from any situation. Oftentimes, leadership is just being positive in the face of negativity. And I realized that was what I chose to do. So a couple of days after all that happened, I had some individuals that came into my room and they were expressing a lot of negativity about what had happened. And when I say negative, they were having a conversation off to the side of my bed while some doctors were talking to me, and I caught hints of their conversation. It went along the lines of, what a shame. We send these young men and women off to war and they come home and they're broken and they're battered. They're never going to be the same. They're never going to be able to reach their full potential again. And I remember hearing this. And when the doctor left and I was all alone in the room, I remember thinking to myself, is that it? I mean, this is what I have to look forward to? But I realized one of the greatest gifts you have in any life ambush, including this one, is you have a choice in how you're going to react to it. You can allow those bombs and bullets of life to absolutely overwhelm and incapacitate you, and you can just crumble on the spot and say, woe is me, and become this victim. Or you can get up and drive forward and start making forward progress. Inch by inch, foot by foot, mile by mile. That is how we get out of a life ambush. That's how we get off the X. So when all that happened, I said, no, I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for myself. I'm not going to let these other people feel sorry for me. And when my wife came back in, I asked her for my notepad because I couldn't talk. I was trached and wired shut. And I wrote out this message. And it said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country I deeply love. I will make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically I have the ability to recover. And then I'm going to push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it. We signed it to management just because I don't know why. We thought it'd be funny or something. But put it on a bright orange piece of paper and we put it on the hospital door. And it took on a life of its own. It went viral. It went all across the country, all across the military. It earned me an invitation to the White House to meet President Bush. It has been written about in multiple high-level books, including Secretary Gates, including First Lady Michelle Obama. And it continues to make an impact to this day. I have individuals who are going through cancer, who have had major traumatic incidents, and even for the wounded warriors who still go through the ward at Walter Reed, where the original sign hangs, still reach out to me and say, wow, this made a difference. So all of that to say to people, that is the power of choice. I chose to be positive in the face of an incredibly negative, overwhelming, anxiety-filled situation. But look at the ripple effects it caused by getting up and driving forward. And that is what I am telling people to do in this life ambush. Don't lay there and feel sorry for yourself, man. You can write your own sign on the door in this crisis and get up and make a difference.
I love it. And you have 2 best-selling books. Tell us about the books.
So the first book, The Trident, I got to step back for 1 second when I talk about the Trident, because a lot of people automatically assume, wow, getting shot up and going through that and 4 years of surgeries, 40 surgeries, that must have been the worst thing you ever went through. But what a lot of people don't know, and this is what my first book, The Trident, talks about, I'd actually been through another life ambush before that happened, and it was a leadership failure. And it was just some poor leadership decisions and some immaturity as a young leader, coupled with arrogance and ego, almost got me kicked out of the SEAL team several years prior to my injuries in Iraq. And that journey of coming to understand what it is to be an effective leader, to be a humble leader, to understand, especially in combat, that leadership decisions have very deep consequences where people's lives are on the line. That was a very long journey and a very hard journey, because I damaged my credibility as a leader within the special operations combat community. And We don't suffer that very easily. So it took years for me to rebuild my reputation and the credibility to be able to lead guys again. So fast forward, so then I get injured on the battlefield and I'm laying in that hospital bed. That was the other thing that drove me forward. I said, you know what, man, you've been through worse. You've overcome harder odds. You will overcome this. So my first book, The Trident, which became a New York Times bestseller, is about that journey. It is about that leadership failure, this young kid who, was dumb and just immature, and basically how he overcame those immaturities and came to understand and grow to become a good leader and understand what leadership is. Then it goes into those injuries in Iraq. It goes into the recovery, and it follows that journey. So it's a redemption story. It is an overcoming adversity and a resilience story, and it's a leadership story. And it's also a love story, because it follows the journey of my wife and family, my wife is just amazing. So after The Trident had done so well, I had so many people reaching out to me saying, okay, we loved your book, but how do we do that? How do we build an overcome mindset? How did you get to that place in the hospital where you were able to get off that X and drive forward? So Overcome came out just a few months ago in December, and that is what the Overcome is built on. It is like the how-to to the Trident. So it breaks it down into several parts. The first part is, if you are in a life ambush, here's how you get off the X. And I give you step-by-step processes on how to do it. Then it goes into, how do we lead ourselves so we proactively can be better prepared and balanced for the future life ambushes that are coming? How do we lead others out of life ambushes? And then how do we lead always? How do we maintain that over the course of our life so that we're never fully caught off guard by anything? And Jeff, I got to tell you, it's been pretty exciting. I've had a lot of people who have read my book since this major global pandemic started. And they've said, oh my God, I cannot tell you how thankful I am that I read your book before this crisis started. I was so much better prepared for it.
Wow. Well, I have to say that life ambushed you again. You've got this wonderful speaking career, and then this pandemic happens, and obviously meetings are canceled right and left. But you didn't stay on the X, did you?
Absolutely not. You can't. You can't. The X will, like I said before, it's like quicksand. It will pull you down. And the longer you sit on it, the longer you feel sorry for yourself, the more you will get pinned down and the harder it is to get up. This is a historical ambush for all of us around the world. And just everything across the board, the physical implications, mental, emotional, financial. I don't think there's any companies that have not been hit financially, except maybe for Charmin and Lysol. I think they're going to be okay.
And maybe Netflix. And Zoom.
Netflix is definitely, yeah, exactly. But for me, like everybody else, it was pretty, I will admit, in the very beginning, it was a little shocking because we were on track to have our most successful quarter, our most successful first part of the year we had ever had, just getting out there and spreading this message with companies. And in a 96-hour period, I had every event canceled for March and April and already starting to look at May. And now here we are. We're the end of March, and already the president recently just put out, we're going to need to push another 30 days. So, what did we do? And what do you have to do in any life ambush? Well, you have to understand that you can't stay in the spot you're in. You're taking effective fire. You're going to wither and die, maybe not physically, but maybe financially or maybe mentally and emotionally if you're not careful. So for all of us, we've got to take a look at what is occurring, and then we have to look at how we can pivot in any business. And that's exactly what we did also. And thankfully, and I talk a lot about this in the book, you've got to be a little proactive in your thinking. And we had already started to look at, okay, what happens if speaking dries up? So we had started moving into the online coaching space. I launched a group called the Overcome Army. It's an online coaching program for individuals who want to be the best versions of themselves, who want to learn the principles that I talk about in the Overcome book and how to implement them in their lives, and also to have one-on-one access to me to help guide and coach them. So we had been building that platform for about 4 or 5 months before this pandemic hit. So it accelerated our timeline for launch, but it's pretty exciting. I've got about 40 members of the Overcome Army now. I mean, it's a reasonably priced program. It's $49.99 a month to be a member of that program. And you get classes on mindset, on how to stay positive, on all the little things that we take for granted, that when we take a step back and recognize them, it makes us not only better in business, better in our families, it makes us better prepared for all the things that are out there. So between that, the virtual webinars, the virtual talks that we had already started doing, so as opposed to a lot of people who were like, what is Zoom? And they were trying to figure that out after all this had happened. We had already been planning for this. We had done a webinar only a couple of weeks earlier, and we had got to test our system. We had tested the webinar platform. We had it built big enough that we could handle most of the events we thought we may have. So when this happened, we were ready to make that pivot. And that's exactly what we are doing now. We're implementing that plan. After this talk, I actually have a talk with some company in New York. I have another one planned where I'm going to be speaking once a week for another company out of New Jersey. Motivation, how we continue to lead ourselves when we've lost structure, how we build discipline in our own lives, how we maintain our morale amidst when we're all isolated and we feel isolated even more so because of everything going on in the world. How do we maintain the integrity of our teams and the morale? So those are all the things I'm going to be talking about. And the biggest thing, we were ready. We weren't totally caught off guard. And that's what I recommend. And that's what my book Overcome is all about.
Well, I want you to end with kind of a message of inspiration. And there are countless people watching this right now who are saying, hey, I was a waiter. My restaurant closed down. What am I supposed to do? I don't know if I can feed my family. I don't know if I can make rent. What do you say to that person?
I tell you that every storm has an end. I mean, so right now it does look dark. I mean, for many of us, I mean, so many that had jobs that maybe they didn't work in something, they had the ability to pivot. But you know what? One of the most amazing things is I also call life ambushes the end moments, because so many of us, when we have one of these life ambushes, they are such a monumental thing. And I want to clarify something with people out there before I give this inspiration to you. So I think there's a lot of people in this life who have poor perspective, and they may have what I would call a schedule disruption, which is not at the level of a life ambush. A life ambush is something that will forever leave physical, mental, or emotional scars on you, or financial scars like this one, or, a myriad of the three. So, but here's one of the biggest things. When they hit us and we get pinned down on that X and we feel like, oh my God, there's no way I can drive forward. And we feel like so many people have said it. They're like, oh my God, it is the end. And the interesting thing, it may be the end for certain things in your life. I mean, it could be the end for your business. I won't lie. For some people, their business may dry up because of this. But don't let that limit you. One of the greatest gifts that comes out of the end moments is the new beginnings. And I've met so many people, so many wounded warriors, so many companies, so many individuals that had a the end moment. They had a relationship ended, a business ended, or, with wounded warriors, they lost a limb or something like that. But out of that journey, out of that grind and getting to the other side, they had new ideas and they set off on new paths. And out of those new paths became these new beginnings that redefined them, where they went off and they created a new business, or they met somebody new that they have an amazing relationship, or they launched them down a path like me, where now I'm a professional speaker and I'm writing books. I never would have done that if it hadn't been for that moment that occurred to me in Iraq. So for all of you that feel overwhelmed and pinned to the X right now, and you think to yourself, it is the end, have hope. Have hope. Get off that X, drive forward, start being creative. I'm telling you, you will reinvent yourself. And I've met so many people that will look back. It will be hard in the moment. I won't lie to you. It always is. When the storm is the darkest, it is the most dire. We're the most afraid. But you will look back on it a couple of years from now. And like so many of the other people I've met, they say, you know what, man, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow, that is so powerful. We're going to end by putting up your website. Why don't you give us the domain name?
It's jasonredman.com.
Jason.
And from there, and I have two actually, but you can get to either one. But jasonredman.com is my speaking website, and then getoffx.com is where my coaching and courses are located.
Wow, you are such an inspiration. Jason, thank you for blessing us with your message and your inspiration. And it's just been an honor to have you on the show.
Jeff, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I always appreciate you and everything you're doing, man. So thank you.
You bet. God bless. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.